Welcome, everybody. John Arvosis here, Washington, D.C., here to talk to you about Ukraine and today's big updates. Lots of updates, actually. We're going to start again with a quick update about Iran because the women's protests are still going on there. Going well, so to speak, although government's getting a little more antsy, which is scary because they're going to crack down at some point. But anyway, let me just make sure I'm online on my TikTok. There we go. And as always, folks, if you want to maybe start by introducing yourselves and where you are all from, that's always kind of a nice way to do this. Happy Friday. It's finally cooling down in DC. I'm trying to wear my jacket again. We'll see if I get away with this today or if I melt, but we shall see. Anyway, yeah, so check in, everybody, where you're from, and then we will get rolling. What's going on? I don't know. Not much. Not much. Oh, I did. I went to urgent care today because so many of you had recommended I go because of my crazy monkeypox vaccine rash thing that I had. And it seems that several of you who were being a pain in the butt were legitimately a pain in the butt. Urgent care said I did have a little skin infection from my my monkeypox vaccine inoculation, whatever. And I'm a little annoyed. Anyway, we can talk about it at the end, but I'm a bit annoyed because they did not give us nearly enough information. Long story. I don't want to get monkeypox. I'm happy I got the monkeypox vaccine, but nonetheless, I'm a little annoyed that I don't think they gave us not enough information. And interestingly, last little point, but the doctor or the nurse even said to her, physician's assistant said to me that she's been seeing lots and lots and lots of people that had the exact same weird large rash that I have. I mean, I had a 5 by 3 inch rash that I'd had, and she said it's definitely a skin infection. So kind of annoying. Anyway. So back to Ukraine. Yep, we were waiting just another quick minute here for folks to come in. I think we're good now. I'm going to start with a quick Iran update because, as you guys know, big story brewing there, and I think it's an important story for us to know about. Thank you for the gifts there on TikTok. As always, I've got my how to help thing up there. Follow me for sure. That's the #1 way you guys can help. Oops. And now I'm watching. Oh, there we go. TikTok. I saw TikTok do that for a second there. I saw that. Don't slow down on me, TikTok. Oh, TikTok's being bad today. Ruh-roh. TikTok keeps freezing. I'm watching that happen. That's not good. That's not good. In any case, so yeah, let me get rolling here. So thanks, guys. Yeah, you can follow me. If you can do the gifts on TikTok, the only things not to do are the little hats and the glasses because those don't work with this layout. But otherwise, please feel free to do the TikTok gifts. You guys help support me, keep me providing this kind of news because I'm trying to do it full time, and I can only do that if you guys help me pay my bills. So thank you there. Thank you for the super chats on YouTube, and for questions, submit the questions via the Q&A box on TikTok and on YouTube. You can submit them in the questions at the bottom or via the super chat questions. And let's dig right in. I'm going to switch over to my topic list. Here we go. And we are ready to go. All right, let's start going. So in Iran, so you may be aware, or you should be at this point, that there have been protests going on in Iran for about a week now after 22-year-old Mahsa Amini died while in custody after having been arrested by the morality police. Iran has morality police. And she died, the police say, she died of a heart attack. This healthy 22-year-old young woman died of a heart attack in custody with bruises all over her legs that her father said, of course, this woman did not have bruises all over her legs when she went into custody. And they arrested her because, of course, she wasn't wearing the hijab, which is, you know, the headscarf that conservative, well, not just conservative, but I was going to say conservative Muslims, but in this case, Iran is ultra fundamentalist, and it is a crime for women not to wear that. Well, she dies. She gets buried last Saturday, and nationwide protests break out. Really kind of amazing protests across the country. I've been showing you guys videos the last few days. The Iranian government is getting more and more worried. Thank you for the hearts on TikTok. They're getting more and more worried about this. One sec. They've shut down a lot of the mobile internet in the country to try to give the activists less of a chance of showing the protest going on because, you know, you can imagine people see the protest going and it fans more protests. And it frankly just, if you've ever been involved in a political protest, especially a large one, with thousands of people, or like marches on Washington for different causes, it could be the pro-life, the pro-choice, whatever. When you're with a couple 100,000 people, it's very empowering. And virtually it's empowering as well for Iranians to see these kind of protests nationwide. The government sponsored counter protests today, calling for executions of the protesters themselves. Human rights groups say about 50 Iranians have been killed so far by the government. The government today started using live ammunition rounds, in other words, live bullets against the protesters, and is starting to talk about the military stepping in to help out. So that's very scary. Thank you for that cake on TikTok. So let's jump into Ukraine. So Ukraine news also really kind of awful today. Let me circle something here I don't want to forget. The Ukraine news, the United Nations, among others, has been investigating the war crimes, the alleged war crimes in Ukraine. I say alleged. I mean, we all know, but just to be fair, alleged. I'm a lawyer, and the thank you for the Friday thing on TikTok. The UN appointed some investigators to look into the allegations of war crimes the Russians were committing. Those independent investigators submitted their report today and issued a damning statement at the UN. Let me read this a little bit from the New York Times. Russian soldiers have raped and tortured children in Ukraine, a United Nations appointed panel of independent legal experts said in a damning statement on Friday that concluded war crimes had been committed in the conflict. Quote, the commission has documented cases in which children have been raped, tortured, and unlawfully confined, the panel's chairman, Eric Mose, told the council. The commission found that some Russian troops had committed sexual and gender-based violence, with the victims ranging in age from 4 years old to 82. There are examples of cases where relatives were forced to witness the crimes. The commission's findings were based on visits to 27 towns and settlements in the regions of Kyiv, Chernihiv, Kharkiv, Sumy, and interviews with more than 150 victims and witnesses. Last little point. The head of the commission says, we were struck by the large number of executions in the areas that we visited, noting that common features of such killings included prior detention, hands tied behind backs, gunshot wounds to the head, and slit throats. The other point that was made in the article was that the investigators remarked on how similar all the stories were that they were getting from the victims and from the families of the victims. They were getting the exact same stories of the kind of torture happening in town after town, which lends credibility to it being real, because how would all of these unrelated people who don't know each other be describing, it's a very similar kind of torture. Moving on to the Russian mobilization, as you know, this week, Vladimir Putin gave a speak, spoke to the nation, I think it was 2 days ago, actually, Wednesday morning, and announced the mobilization, basically a draft. But it was only going to be a partial draft. And Putin, and then the defense minister after him, gave a number of things to sort of make people feel better. For example, it was only going to be a draft of 300,000 people. It was only going to be a draft of people who previously served in the military. So military reservists who had previous military service. It was, what else were they saying? I'm trying to remember. There was something else. But anyway, a lot of that ends up not being true now. For starters, Meduza, which is a very reputable sort of Russian media outlet, but is now kind of working on the outside, obviously, says that Russia plans to mobilize 1.2 million conscripts for the war in Ukraine, not 300,000, as the government is claiming. Quick aside on that, Lukashenko, who's the dictator in Belarus, which is the country right north and to the west of Ukraine, saddles up right next to Russia, big friend of Putin. Lukashenko is saying there will be no mobilization in Belarus. Thank you for the hearts there on TikTok. There will be no mobilization, which is interesting because, every time he sort of helps Putin, he also steps one step back. Clearly, the dictator in Belarus is Well, actually, we've been told this from the beginning. He's apparently very worried about his own hold on power there, and therefore has not wanted to get directly involved in the war. He's been happy to let the Russians come through his territory and attack Ukraine. He's been happy to let them launch those attacks from his territory, but he's not been willing to send his own military, which is interesting. And this backs that up. Back to the mobilization. Institute for the Study, I'm going to take my jacket off. Institute for the Study of War, which is that really good defense think tank I'm always telling you guys about. They did sort of more analysis on this today. And basically, it's very interesting, actually. Oh, the Affleck duck is over there on TikTok. I see that. A lot of folks feel that this mobilization, and Institute for Study of War said this yesterday as well, it's not nothing, but it shouldn't be exaggerated. In other words, we shouldn't be freaking out. We shouldn't be fooled by numbers like 1.2 million. Oh my God. First of all, Ukraine's got 1 million, right? Ukraine's got 1 million reservists and everybody that it mobilized. So it's not like Russia has that much more than Ukraine has, right? Second of all, well, let me kind of go through some of what they're saying here. The Kremlin's heavy-handed approach to partial mobilization, this is Institute for the Study of War, may successfully meet the Kremlin's internal quota of mobilized personnel. In other words, they want 300,000 to 1 million. Maybe they'll get 300,000 to 1 million, but not really. May successfully meet their internal quota, but is unlikely to generate effective soldiers and is prompting significant domestic backlash for little gain. The Kremlin is, this is ISW still, the Kremlin is openly not adhering to its promised conditions for partial mobilization just 24 hours after its September 21st declaration. They claimed that they were going to have the 300,000 troops called up. Now we're hearing 1.2 million. That's going to freak even more people out. They said only those with military experience would be called up, but they've been grabbing guys with no experience. One example I read, two examples I read. One was a 35-year-old guy in information technology they grabbed, no military experience. Another was a 50-year-old man with no military experience. And then they grabbed another guy in his 60s. Now, I'm not sure. Thank you for the bonbons over on TikTok there. I'm not sure if the guy in his 60s, I don't remember with that story whether he was somebody with no military experience, but the point there was a guy in his 60s who's years away from retirement, right? Years away from retirement, and they're drafting him. I mean, it's a sign of how desperate they are, but it's also a sign of these are not, to quote Donald Trump, they're not grabbing their best and brightest for this mobilization. One other lie they said literally 2 days ago, we will not be drafting students. The defense secretary said they're drafting students. They're literally going to campuses and dragging kids out of their classes to draft them, pulling them out of their classes and putting them on buses. Okay. And they said 2 days ago, they weren't going to draft students. And I told you yesterday that they've been forcibly registering protesters, telling folks that have been protesting the draft that you can either go to prison for 15 years or you can register for the draft right now. Not register for the draft, register for military service. So you're volunteering. One guy I read in an article basically called them on their bluff because he felt it was a bluff. So he told me, he goes, you can't register me. You can't, I'm not going to do it. No, I'm not gonna. And they let him go, but he's in hiding now. New York Times or CNN or somebody was able to interview the guy. He's in hiding now because he's afraid they're going to come after him. But it's interesting that when he called them on the bluff, they didn't register him. They let him go. Interesting, because it's a dictatorship, but there still seems to be somewhat of a rule of law-ish in Russia. I don't know if my friend Marion's here today because she's our super duper Russia expert. And actually Russia legal expert is what Marion is, to sort of get a sense of how does Russia skirt between this dictatorship aspect of it, but also this strange rule of law aspect that in the military, especially, they seem to be able to go to court and challenge these things sometimes at least, which is interesting. At least 5 recruitment offices. Thank you. The TikTok gifts are coming in today. Thank you guys. I appreciate that for the origami thingy. At least 5 military recruitment offices were set on fire in Russia in the last couple of days following the mobilization. 2 military enlistment offices were set on fire in Khabarovsk, which is in the Russian Far East, and Amur Oblast on the night of September 22nd. Since September 21st, when Putin announced the mobilization, Russians have tried to burn at least 5 recruitment offices in the country. The Lithuanian foreign minister said that they will not be accepting Russians fleeing the draft. This has sparked a really interesting discussion in the last couple of days of people I follow online. And the discussion has been whether basically how we feel about everybody that's protesting. Sorry, my allergies are going off again today, so I'm like itchy, man. How we feel about all the Russians that are finally protesting now that they're drafted, right? Now, having said that, half the people protesting in the last several days have been women. So it's not just the guys. I mean, the women aren't getting drafted, but meaning the women aren't protesting for themselves necessarily. They're protesting, in general. But a lot of folks have been saying that they think it's disingenuous that the Russians are finally now protesting. I mean, there have been protests before, of course, but not a ton. The Germans have said, for example, that they would consider draft dodgers, whatever, people fleeing the draft in Russia as for asylum in Germany, right? Lithuanian foreign minister had a different approach. Listen to this. We see them not as anti-war people. We see them as anti-fighting the war people, which I thought was a great line. Mr. Landsbergis said in a telephone interview from the United Nations, they were not fleeing Russia when Bucha happened, when Kyiv was shelled, or when any other horrific things happened in Ukraine. Either they were silent, he said, or they didn't care, and some of them even supported it publicly. Suddenly, when it's their war, they are fleeing. I don't know. It was funny, actually. There was an interesting discussion sort of started on TikTok. I think it was last night. I was weighing in a little too, because I'm very divided on this. I mean, I do think there is a selfishness involved here. I will say that some Russians were protesting. Remember way back at the beginning, and it wasn't like 15,000 that were arrested or some crazy number of Russians way back at the beginning. So clearly some of them are protesting legitimately. Let me get my glasses on because I can see some of you guys weighing in here. Empty History Buff is saying it's fear of their own safety and not for that of innocence. Syndicate is saying, who's Syndicate is saying he's got a new name for the new year. As they say, war is when your government tells you who the enemy is. A revolution is when you figure it out yourself. A lot of Z's are being peeled off car windows. John D. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a little divided. I guess the other point people bring up a lot of the Europeans, a lot of the Baltic states, Lithuanians especially bring this up, but Estonians too. They say, you know what? We've had the Russians coming for 30 years now since the Soviet Union, dissolved. And it's not like, oh, hello, Daniel, logging in from the Arctic. Lovely seeing you. Where is Iqaluit Nunavut? Just curious. I mean, whose Arctic is that? Is that Canada? I'm guessing not Alaska because I might recognize it if it was Alaska, but I'm not going to swear it's not Alaska. Just curious. I spent a lot of time in Alaska, so spent a lot of love and respect for the native communities up there, but especially the culture and the baskets and all that stuff. Oh my God, just love that stuff. Alaska, though, I don't know the Canada one very well. Canada, okay, that's what I thought it might be because I didn't recognize the name. Yeah, very, very cool. In any case, back to this. So, I get it, but what the Baltic countries are saying, for example, we've had 30 years since the Soviet Union dissolved, and we've had Russian tourists coming, and it's not like it's changed them or the country. And we're also seeing a lot of Russians in Western Europe, in Europe, outside of Russia, who are, thousands of them in these countries who are coming forward and protesting on behalf of Russia in support of the war. And you'd think that after so much time in these other countries, right, they would embrace freedom and they would be opposed to the violence and everything else, and they're not. So, but having said that, it's an anecdote. Maybe the silent majority of the Russians who go abroad do turn into better people as far as the violence and the war aspect. I don't know. Succession voting. So these succession votes. So you should have heard, hopefully, that starting today, let me pull up the name of these provinces, the oblasts, but starting today, the Russians are starting elections in Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk provinces, or called oblasts in Russia, states. And you can see all of them sort of a little crescent there at the bottom of Ukraine. Crimea, which is all the way at the bottom, is Ukrainian territory that the Russians stole in 2014. The other 4 provinces I just mentioned are Ukrainian territory that the Russians are occupying right now. Now, they only occupy about half of Donetsk. They occupy most of Luhansk, but they're losing some of it, the 2 in the northeast. But what the Russians are doing is they're holding elections starting today, going for the next 5 days. Elections. I mean, elections. They're sham elections. They're not elections. And at the end of the 5 days, we are going to find out miraculously that all these people in Ukraine who have been fighting the Russians, who can't stand the Russians, all will want to leave Ukraine and become part of Russia magically. And this is exactly what the Russians did in Crimea, which I showed you is the Providence Peninsula. Oops, I can pull John's question away or comment. There we go. You can see Crimea all the way in the bottom there. That's the province of Ukraine that Russia stole in 2014. It is still Ukrainian, but Russia occupies it. And they did the same thing back then. They held a fake election and claimed, "Oh, look, right? We're everybody wants to join us." So what's thought's going to happen now is at the end of these 5 days, Russia's going to declare victory and they're going to annex basically, it's not legal because it's not legal what they're doing, but they're going to claim that slice of Ukraine now is Russian territory. And now we're going to extend our borders to include all of that. Nobody will accept it. What was, I say, interesting, creepy, a Twitter friend of mine, Maxine, I think it's Edistavi. I'm going to pronounce his last name wrong. Ukrainian civil rights, gay rights, LGBT rights activist. He was tweeting today about his family and how the Russians came to his family's apartment door in southern Ukraine because they told him what happened, and they were there with guns in tow, 2 soldiers with like machine guns, and then the election worker hands you the ballot, and in front of the election worker, you're supposed to get your pen, fill out, but literally, there's stay with Ukraine, join Russia. There's literally 2 circles on the page, and you're supposed to fill in the circle in front of the guys with the gun, hand it back to them, and then they take your fair ballot and walk away. And as Maxime said, you can either vote to join Russia or you can vote to risk your life. Oh, the other thing was, is this the one? Yeah, here we go. This is from another report from one of the governors of one of the other regions. If a person doesn't open the door, Russian forces threaten to break in. When a person ticks no in the ballot, meaning no, I don't want to join Russia, the guys with the guns take notes. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty sick. It's pretty sick. Now, mind you, it's all fake to start with, but it's sad because, well, let's see what happens. I mean, we know what's going to happen. But what I mean is, let's see what happens, because I will say this: Biden and Blinken, our Secretary of State, did something very smart going into this. And Blinken at the UN, I think yesterday, the day before, Blinken called out the Russians and said, this was actually very good. He said, and now what our Russian friends are going to do next, they're going to hold these fake elections. They're going to claim that these territories are now part of Russia, and then they're going to tell us that we're not allowed to fight in those that Ukraine is not allowed to fight and take back those territories because they'll be attacking Russia. So the good part was our guys got it out there first. So when Putin claims it now, he's going to look stupid. It helps. And actually, and it's another sign, which is good too, that this whole argument of, oh, it would be an attack on Russia, oh, nuclear war, blah, 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 is a bunch of BS that we're not going to accept. And having said that, the Russians claimed this about Crimea too. Remember, Crimea they stole in 2014? They claimed, oh, that's Russian territory. If Ukraine attacks it with Western weapons, that's going to be like, war with Russia, with the West. Well, Ukraine's been attacking Crimea for, months now, including a couple of weeks ago going after all those military bases. Remember, they blew up the air base that the planes were on? Those pictures of all the Russian tourists on the beach like fleeing because the air base was exploding. Didn't see nuclear war as a result of that. Didn't see the Russians say, oh, you used, Western weapons or whatever you did there. Now the West is involved. So there's been a lot of bluffs coming from Russia with this entire, careless smoking. Exactly, Roshin. Exactly. Careless smoking. Washington Post. So speaking of the nuclear weapon threats, the Washington Post reports that the U.S. has been warning Russia against using nuclear weapons for months now. For several months, the U.S. President Joe Biden's administration has been sending private messages to Moscow about grave consequences that would follow Russia's use of nuclear weapons. Now, interesting about this, the administration has left the threat intentionally vague. And it's called, what is it? They're calling this strategic ambiguity as well, similar to the policy we had up until Biden of being vague about what we would do if China invaded Taiwan, right? Strategic ambiguity because you're being ambiguous. Like you're not saying, like, would the U.S. get involved militarily? Would we not get involved militarily? Would we put men and women on the ground, our troops, if China invaded Taiwan? It was left vague so that China would worry, and China would, its worst fears, China would then conjure up in its head. Biden kind of changed that because now he said outright, we will. But what's happening with this is the administration has made it clear to the Russians, you better not, because holy hell will come down on your head if you use any kind of nuclear weapons, even the tactical nuclear weapons, the quote unquote smaller ones. And the idea is, again, leave it vague and menacing so that the Russians will imagine the worst possible thing and hopefully not do it at all. So good that we've got that news. But again, I guess not really surprising. I mean, I assumed all along that the Biden administration had made clear to the Russians that, this was not acceptable. A little more tea. Ukraine's military says, oh yeah, this was interesting. Russia attacked Odessa, Ukraine. Odessa is a big, beautiful city that I've never been to Ukraine, but I hope to go. A big, beautiful city, famous city in southern Ukraine. If you look at my map, if you look up from the bottom of the map in the sea, you see the word Google. Go straight up and you'll run into Odessa on the coast there, right? You'll see Odessa. Well, Odessa is so far free. The Russians do not control it, but they do control Crimea, the big peninsula there, and they control Kherson, Zaporizhia, etc. So a lot of land that is near Odessa, they control. Actually, here, even better. You can see the land the Russians control in the light pink and dark pink, right? So dark pink is Crimea, and the light pink, Kherson, Zaporizhia, etc. Note where Odessa is. Odessa is just to the left of the Kherson province. It's got the what's it got there? It's got the 100 miles. Yeah. So that's almost perfectly. It's about 100 miles west of Kherson. So that's probably 70 miles, 60 to 70 miles west. I think 60 miles I read today outside of Russian controlled territory. So not that far. Well, what happened today was Russia attacked Odessa, Ukraine, with Iranian kamikaze drones. Now, the kamikaze drones, you'll recall, we had provided a bunch to Ukraine, and it seems now that Iran has provided a bunch of them to Russia. Kamikaze drones are drones that pack an explosive charge in the drone, and it flies around. You look for a target, you're controlling it, and you crash it into the target, and when it hits the target, it blows up. And literally, it's a drone that you will use once because it is a kamikaze. It's not officially called a kamikaze drone, but it harkens back to the kamikaze fighters in World War II from Japan who would take their planes, their fighter jets, and crash into American ships and kill themselves in doing so, but would blow up the American ships at the same time. The kamikaze drones do the exact same thing. The drone is sacrificed, but you get a big explosion. The Ukrainians are saying that several of the drones were destroyed. 2 of them made it through and I guess blew up, at least destroyed an administrative building in the port area, killing 1 civilian. I've just got a quick video to show you just because it was nice. It was shared by the Ukrainian Ministry of the Interior today, showing kids singing in a bomb shelter in Odessa, because they all went to hide because of these drones flying over and the possibility of explosions. And this was just the kids singing today. I thought it was kind of nice. But anyway, watch really quick. There we go. Yeah, I like that stuff. I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. Couple more stories and then we're done, actually. I mean, and then we'll do our Q&A and discussion. The Finland is going to introduce entry visa restrictions for Russians. This comes on the heels of the Baltic countries, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, all saying we're not going to let the Russians in with tourist visas. Poland saying the same thing. And now Finland, which is way to the north, is saying the same thing, so that Russia pretty much, I think that's pretty much all the European countries, other than Ukraine, that buttress Russia, well, Belarus, but whatever, not allowing the Russian tourists in, which is great. New York Times. Okay, this was kind of a wild. I've got two more stories. This was kind of a wild story. Thank you for the waving man on TikTok. I'm going to read this to you, the quote. And I mean, it's what amazes me too is the way the New York Times wrote this story. I find kind of fascinating. Listen to this. A top Russian aviation expert and scientist was found to have died this week under suspicious circumstances, his employer said. I mean, the thing is, a top Russian aviation expert and scientist was found to have died, was the first part. Found to have died, right? Died. But the point is, it was suspicious as hell. So the Times didn't want to say just that he died. They didn't quite want to say he was murdered, but found to have died. His employer said. So they're also saying that basically the employer is saying like, oh, we just found him and he died. What they're claiming is he was climbing like some steps or something. And they literally said this. He was blind in one eye anyway. He must have just fallen off the steps and died. I've not seen any explanation yet as to why this guy would be necessarily somebody that Putin would want dead. I don't know about that yet. Then again, we never really figured out why a number of the energy guys Putin would want dead. Remember all these different guys in the energy industry dying, Russian energy industry dying mysteriously, some of them allegedly killing themselves and then killing their family. Weird stories. The final story here is interesting. I don't know that it means anything, though. I don't know that it means anything, but it's interesting because I'm afraid I don't know what you need to be able to pull this off. A top European Union official European Council President Charles Michel called for suspending Russia from the United Nations Security Council. He said that Russia should be suspended for launching an unprovoked and unjustified war, complained that Russia is among the five permanent members of the Security Council, and those permanent members have veto power over everything the Security Council does. So that's China, the UK, the French, China, Russia, America, French, British are the five. They all have veto power, so they can stop anything the Security Council does. The problem is, I don't know how you suspend Russia. I'd be curious if anybody knows, UN law here about how this works. My guess is going to be that you would need some kind of supermajority vote, I'm going to guess, in the General Assembly of the United Nations. That's my guess, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure you can pull that off. I'm not sure. In any case, that's what I've got for my news today. The last thing we're going to do Q&A now and everything else anyway, but the last thing I was going to tell you as well is that on my Discord, and I'll pull that up just as the thing. On my Discord, discord.aravosis.com, we have a couple different auctions going. One of them, and a large portion of the proceeds will go to help Ukrainian humanitarian stuff we're working on. But the two auctions, one of them is ending tomorrow at around 4 p.m. Eastern or so. That's the one that I can't tell you exactly what it is because it might get me in trouble on TikTok and YouTube. But let's just say it's something from the Ukrainian military that is authentic and Vlad shipped over and is very cool. I can only ship it within the United States. The second thing is a series of patches. And I think actually, I've got the picture. That's the patches. Although I think seeing the patches live is better because you get a much better sense of them. I'll take that off. So the patches are the other thing. Oops, here we go. That works. And I've put 3 of these together and they're very cool. This is these are all military patches. So the military guys, they're Velcro, wear them to identify themselves. This one I like a lot because it's Ukraina, and the Ukrainian flag. Very cool. This one is this one's neat because it's the military, the uniform badge that tankers wear. People that operate tanks. So the guys that work in the tanks, which is very cool. I like that one a lot. And with Ukrainian Trident. And this is one of my favorites because it's a little more obscure, but it's the Ukrainian Department of Homeland Security or Internal Security. It says, Departament. I can read that at the top. And it's showing St. George slaying the dragon is their slogan, or their whatever you call it, mascot logo. And then, of course, the Ukrainian flag colors, blue and gold. So very cool. But that auction will be through next another 4 days or so. But the other one with the military, with the very special military item, is done tomorrow. So be there or be square, discord.aravosis.com. All right, guys, let's jump right in. I will start again with Tiki-Taki here. Remember TikTok, go to the profile, on my TikTok profile, and hit the Q&A button. Let me see here. Boop. Unedited video. I don't know what that was from. Oop, I've got some unedited. Oh, hold on a sec. I did a video on something. I'll save that one for later. All right. Q&A. I think Putin called it a partial mobilization instead of a full to make it seem like it wouldn't be as bad. That's exactly right. I've been thinking about this today. Sorry, just to see who that was. Oops. Hang on. That was, Magical Photo Miami. Hey, I was thinking about this today, that it is looking more and more, not like it's a full mobilization, but it's clearly a significant mobilization. And Putin wanted to make it seem like it was much less, right? Wasn't going to be students. They lied. Was only going to be 300,000 men. Now it looks like 1.2 million, right? Was only going to be men with military experience. A lot of other people. Yeah, I think they're trying to downplay it. Thank you, Vernon, for that. Your name cracked David from up the other day. I could tell when he goes, Vernon. Yeah, I think does he think people are stupid? That's the thing I don't get. The Russian people aren't stupid. Thank you for the heart there on TikTok, by the way. Right? So like, they know what's going on. They know their neighbors are getting called up. They know their sons, their daughters, right? Their parents, whatever, are getting called up. How do they know their friends without military experience, their friends who are in school, right? I mean, they know these people are getting called up and it was a lie. So I don't get I do agree with you though. I think that's what Putin was going for, but it doesn't make any sense to me why Putin thought he was going to get away with it. Mac is saying he's seen reports that conscripts are being sent to the front line within 24 hours of conscription. That is probably out in Kursk. That might be in Kursk that I was reading, one of the oblasts, one of the regions, because they were saying that in that region, I believe it was, they're not doing any kind of training at all. They're taking these guys and they're shipping them off right away to Ukraine. Some of the other regions are claiming, I guess Moscow is claiming generally that they're going to do 2 weeks of training. Now, 2 weeks of training gets you nowhere. Supposedly, they're only doing 2 weeks, or in the case of some areas, like Max said, no training, because supposedly, these are guys with military experience. The problem is, these are guys that could have military experience when they were 8. First of all, probably when they were 18. That could have been 10 years ago. That could have been 40 years ago, because we know guys in their 60s are getting drafted. Giving you 2 weeks of military training after 10, 20, 30 years is nothing. That's not helping. And it's really kind of screwed up, actually, because what the Russians are doing is they're treating it as though it is people with recent military experience, so that, we just let you out of your contract 3 months ago, so you're ready to fight, rather than it's not that at all. No, this is why, again, Institute for the Study of War was saying we should take it seriously. We shouldn't just think this is all a joke, what Russia's doing, the mobilization, but at the same time, we shouldn't exaggerate what the impact is going to be, because this, it's not great. I mean, they're not giving these guys good experience. Grodon, Are you surprised how little resistance the mobilization in Russia got? I thought there would be protests for days and people refusing to join. I feel like now or never. You know, I mean, there were protests that first night and then that was it. It seems, you know, I don't know. I'm with you. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, at some point, God helps those who help themselves. The Russian people themselves are going to have to step up and do something. Pyotr, what exactly, or Motek, what exactly did I miss from Rob? Oh, okay. Pyotr had a great post. Why doesn't Zelensky announce an online referendum in Moscow to join Ukraine and then proclaim Moscow as part of Ukraine? Well, I sent Syndicate this earlier, but he'd already seen it, that a Dutch comedian said, well, if you can just hold referendums in other countries, then we're going to hold a referendum in Russia. And what did he say? Did he say we're going to have Russia? Oh, yeah. He said Russia joined the Netherlands because, I mean, maybe Syndicate can tell us more of the details here, but going back hundreds, generations, the Dutch king married some, Russian royalty, and how that made Netherlands the ownership of Russia. And it was very funny. But yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous, obviously ridiculous. What else? Let me look here. Another Q&A. Thank you for the streamers there. Oops, hang on. Q&A. Will there be any punishment for those who are attempting to leave Russia to avoid the war? If they get caught, the question is if they get caught. I mean, oddly enough, part of what Putin did the other day was sign a law or decree or whatever it was, making it a crime to evade the draft. And I don't quite get, to avoid your military service or to flee your military service. And I don't quite get why that was legal in Russia. Like, I think a lot of people were sort of scratching their heads on that one going, what do you mean? Like, I mean, in what country is refusing the government's demand that you serve in the military, like, okay, that we need to pass a law to make it illegal? So I don't know what that was about, but he was doing it. So the question then becomes, will they find will they get their hands on these guys? But, this is where you get into the question, therefore, of, are they political refugees if they go abroad because they're fleeing the draft? And I think in my own mind, I think if you're fleeing the draft because you oppose the war, you're a political refugee. If you're fleeing the draft because you're gung-ho for the war, but you don't want to fight, that's for the suckers, so to speak, then I don't think you're a political refugee, because you're not. You're simply what the Lithuanian foreign minister said. You're not anti-war. You're anti yourself fighting in the war, but you're totally pro-war. So, Brash, good to see you. So far, most soldiers in Ukraine have been from most of the Russians fighting in Ukraine, you mean, have been from poor rural Russia, not rich Moscow or St. Petersburg. Is that changing? Well, people thought it was changing. There certainly are some more coming from Moscow and St. Petersburg, but I am seeing more reports again that saying that it seems like a lot of the men being called up are from the, brown and whatever other skin color you want to pick, but the people of color provinces, I'm calling it, in Russia, right? Poorer areas like, Dagestan, which is like really poor in the south, or maybe southeast, depending. I forget exactly where it is, but it's down there, but very poor. The Asian provinces, things like that. And I was reading reports saying that was still happening. So, my guess is if you're from Moscow, you're more connected, potentially, for sure. I mean, you're more connected than some poor guy in the boonies, but in principle, well, forget the rich. The rich aren't going to go anyway. But I think there's at least a chance it's affecting more people from Moscow and St. Petersburg. I hope. I mean, just from a fairness sake, but also from a political sense, it would be nice if if they got more of them, because there's more of a chance of those guys really causing political hay because they're connected Muscovites, right? John D. Oh, hey, John D's. Our Ukrainian friend, as I recall. Biden says U.S. will never recognize Ukrainian territory as anything other than part of Ukraine, which is good. But what happened to Russia will get consequence. You know, I did see something today. I saw something today saying that, okay, a couple different things are happening. The European Union and the G7, which is okay, I've got to find a good definition for G7 here to give you guys. This is driving me nuts here. Hold on a second. Because I keep sort of saying the, 7 of the most developed world's biggest economies, but I don't know I can tell you who the members are, but I'm not sure how they self-define themselves. An intergovernmental political forum consisting of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK, and the United States. Its members are the world's largest IMF advanced economies and liberal democracies. There you go. Okay, that makes sense. I was going to say, because they're not the top 7 economies, but it's the democracies, liberal democracies, etc. So what I saw was, so the EU and the G7 both were preparing new sanctions if Russia goes ahead with annexation. Now, I still raise the question of, it's kind of surprising to me that we're still dealing with like more sanctions. Why don't we just do the damn sanctions? It's annoying me. I mean, I guess they want more and more that they can put, because that way it's like another punishment or something. I don't know. I don't get it. I think just do the damn thing. I mean, the Russians are committing genocide. We had the UN come out and basically say that again today. Horrific war crimes against children. Just hit them with all the sanctions you can at this point. Elise, thank you for this. Uncles of people I know, knew left for Canada rather than being sent to Vietnam. Okay. Oh, I see what you mean. So like uncles of your friends, in essence, left for Canada rather than being sent to Vietnam. Maybe different because they had also protested, safer to do in the U.S. It was still hard for them and their families, even though Canada is great. Oh, yeah. I remember growing up. That was a whole thing, where people who fled the draft and went to Canada. Yeah. I mean, because I was born early 60s. So I was a kid, during Vietnam, but we knew it existed, and we knew there were these guys who went to Canada and all of that. And I don't remember if it was Jimmy Carter or who finally, I think, pardoned the guys who went to Canada so they could come home. But it was still, still kind of many people looked at it as being a black mark. I'm not saying I do, but meaning it was tough for them to do because it still looked bad, even though, it was obviously a very bad war. Oops. And yes, Canada is great and getting greater. Uzbek has warned its citizens to not fight for foreign militaries. Interesting. Yes. So what happened, Pyotr is saying, I think I read somewhere that Kadyrov, who's the Chechen leader, said that the draft will exclude Chechens. Yes. He claims that the Chechens are already overrepresented in the war, and that something like they've fulfilled 250% or 2,500%. I don't remember what the number was of their quota. I don't know how he figured out their quota. And therefore, he would not be calling up more Chechens, which, I mean, maybe, but this guy is Putin's best buddy, and he's Mr. War, Kadyrov. It's interesting. It almost sounds like he's afraid of political problems at home. I don't know. I mean, it sounds a little weird to me, yeah. So yes, he did say that. It was very weird, I thought. Anglo-Saxons. I always laugh when Europeans use the phrase Anglo-Saxons, because it's so cute. It's like, well, because the French would do that when I was studying in France, Anglo-Saxon, because we don't really use that phrase in American English. I mean, it exists. We know of it, but it's not like something I would refer to us as Anglo-Saxons. I just think it's funny. It's just a different sort of a difference growing up on this side of the Atlantic. Your mentor is a Vietnam draft dodger back in Thunder Bay. Interesting. 300%. Maybe that was it then, Alec. Okay, yeah, because I read 250%, so that's got to be. It's the same ballpark. Yeah, yeah. We say wasp. Oh, is that the same concept for Anglo-Saxons as wasps? Okay, okay. Brave Germans settling over to the Isle. Germans? I've been watching my Vikings. Weren't they Danes? The whole thing confuses. No, that's not true. No, that was the Vikings. Yeah, that's right. The Anglos and the Saxons. I don't even understand. Let's not even go on that. I get very confused when I read about that history of Britain and who came over and which group was which and the whole thing. Right, the Vikings were the Anglo-Saxons, but the Anglos versus the Saxons, and then Alfred or whoever the hell it was that unified them. Anyway, I learned my old British history from fictional documentaries or whatever you call it. What else we got here? Berlusconi's. I did. Yes. Berlusconi, who was the prime minister of Italy a long time ago, put out a statement defending Putin in the invasion today. Yeah. I read the story briefly. I just got captured by like the image of Berlusconi looking he's 85 and he's trying to look good. And it was just a bad, scary picture of Berlusconi. Yeah, I saw that. I mean, and his coalition, I guess, is expected to do well in the elections, right? Alfred was the one who unified the Saxons. There you go, the Anglo-Saxons. That's what I read. That's what I saw on TV. See, I would have never known who King Alfred was, trust me, had it not been for Vikings and all the related TV shows I've been watching. I've been kind of getting into it, actually. Actually, I have a Viking axe dated between 700 and 900 that I bought a while ago because I thought before I got into my Viking phase, my Anglo-Saxon phase. But I like artifacts and things like that are man-made from history. They fascinate me. What else we got? Oh yeah, Berlusconi. I know he's a trip. Let me look here. More Q&A. Are Russian prisons fairly empty from sending prisoners to Ukraine? I don't know about that, but for sure the Russians have been going to the prisons and getting prisoners. Yeah, this was this was probably 2 months ago. They were going to prisons and telling the prisoners that if you fight, this is actually good. If you fight for 6 months, we will wipe out your prison sentence. Here's the problem. A bunch of prisoners a month or two ago agreed to this. Well, Putin, as part of the mobilization 2 days ago, part of what Putin signed in the decree was saying that everybody whose military term is coming up soon to end, it's automatically being continued. It's not ending. And it's not ending for who God knows how long. So I'm wondering if these military guys are in the same boat, that they signed up for 6 months saying their record would be, expunged, and maybe their record will be expunged. It'll be wiped away, wiped clean, but they're not going to let them leave. So that's the other thing that I think is going to piss off a lot of people, because the Russians have, they have been up until now, a certain number of people, it was like 300,000, I think, a year that get called up that had to do military service for a year. But they also had people signing contracts. And I think like after you do the contract, your year, you could sign up to do another year, for example. You could also sign up just for a 3-month contract. Some of the Russians were doing to make extra money. Well, the decree Putin said all those contracts aren't ending. So you could have signed up for 3 months in the Russian military and now be stuck until you meet a HIMARS. I mean, it's really, I'd be pretty pissed if I were Russian in that, especially in that kind of, because you got totally screwed. Daniel is worried about the Europeans this winter. I honestly figure the Europeans will not make it this winter. Italy is looking at loosening some sanctions to lower energy costs. Sweden just elected a far-right coalition. France, I mean, Sweden, we know that Sweden, the Swedish Democrats, who are not Democrats, they're former Nazis, literally, that they won, I think it was 20% or whatever it was in Sweden. Italy, right, Berlusconi's coalition is looking good, so to speak, for Sunday. I don't know. And I think that's what Putin's counting on. Putin is hoping that like all of this mobilization, everything just gets it so that he can hold on long enough. To, hold on longer than the Europeans, basically. and that therefore the Europeans will cave, and he'll be, whether it's negotiations or what it is, it'll put him in a better stead. Let's see. I mean, some of the sanctions may go, but it's not going to stop us from helping. I hope the Europeans or us or whoever don't cave on the sanctions, but that's not going to, that doesn't really solve the problem of Ukraine getting better and better weapons. That's not going to help the Russian troops on the ground, right? I hope it doesn't help the Russian economy, but even if it helps the Russian economy, that doesn't help the Russian troops on the ground. It doesn't make them fight any better. It doesn't help their morale. It doesn't give them better weapons. And the Ukrainians are going to keep getting better and better and better weapons as time goes on. So it doesn't stop us from helping the Ukrainians. And actually, you almost could argue that it might even put more pressure on Europe to help Ukraine even more, to say, well, look, we don't have a choice. We've got to cave on some of these sanctions because we're really worried about the energy thing. But to make up for it, Germany, we're going to start giving you some of the tanks you want, or whatever, right? So arguably, there could be a silver lining out of that, arguably. But who knows? Who knows? Felix is disagreeing. Our ancestors survived tougher conditions, so I think private households should be fine and not complain. I'm more worried about the economy. Now, one thing Gordon brings up, because I saw a video that John showed me today. What do you know about the children being kidnapped by Russia? I see so little news about it. How many have been taken? Well, how many is a tough question, because the Russians have admitted that they've taken some 2 million Ukrainians, adults, and 300,000 Ukrainian children, as refugees in Russia, right? How many of those were stolen or taken hostage? Probably kidnapped, probably 90%. I saw some numbers saying that, but we don't know. John was showing me a video by Sky News, and it was a report from Sky News out of the UK, and they were interviewing a Ukrainian woman, and she was talking about her daughter and the last time she saw her young daughter. She was in one of the provinces in the east that Russia's occupying, and the Russian troops there, the Russian administration, told her, we know it's very hard for children, especially the war, the occupation. She's Ukrainian, right? So we're setting up children's camps for the summer in Russia. And if you'd like to, I'm guessing it's free, and we're setting it up so that children can go for a few weeks and get a nice retreat and then come home, and at least they get away from the war for 2 weeks. And she's thinking, oh, wouldn't it be great to have my daughter be able to go for just a couple of weeks and not have bombs going off and everything else, right? Well, they kidnapped her daughter. They took her daughter. The daughter's gone. Just gone. That's it. And this obviously is, one story, but one of many. Horrific, absolutely horrific broadcast. I was watching it earlier today. Really just, yeah. So, I'm with you. It's so outrageous. It's so outrageous. It's funny because John sent it to me and said, what could be worse? And I said, well, what could be worse is the breaking news from the New York Times that the UN just came out and said that the Russians are committing war crimes, sex crimes against children as young as 4, rape and torture of children as young as age 4. So I don't know. The biggest problem, I've talked about this actually before when it was becoming a bigger story, but before, the children thing, how do we even know, right? Like this woman, they take your daughter and it's gone. Well, how do you know what kids they've taken? We don't know what kids have been killed in the war. We don't know what kids are missing. We don't know what kids are maybe with their parents, internal refugees, external, meaning they've moved to other parts of Ukraine. Maybe they've left the country. Families may not know about their extended family. Like I said, you don't even know about your kid's missing. Did the Russians take him? Is your kid dead? Is your kid in a hospital? Who knows? And the lawyer in me says, how do you prove it then? Like if you're going after them for war crimes, you have to literally prove the kids that were taken. In this woman's case, maybe she can prove it, but it's really screwed up. Yeah, it's really screwed. No, it's horrible. It's horrible. But I'm with you. There's got to be a better way of there needs to be more consternation about this. Vernon, good to see you again. Um, the thing is, I've been taught that I can't necessarily read things like that so I don't get in trouble with the morality police. But the issue with that is that I had read somewhere that they thought that he probably did talk to the degree he could talk. He's a big friend of Putin. That's why he was traded. So I do not think he runs any kind of a risk. Excuse me. I haven't yawned at you guys in months or weeks at least. I don't think he's in any danger of anything bad happening to him because he's a friend of Putin. And that's the whole reason he got released to start with, because the Russians wanted him released. So, I suspect he's safe on that front. All right, guys. I'm going to call it quits. We're at 7:01. As always, please follow me if you would on the various apps that you are on. I am going to go over to our Discord next. So if you want to join us over there, I would appreciate it. Discord.aravosis.com, and we will continue the conversation for a while over there. As always, as I said, you can go over there, and we've got one auction through tomorrow of something very cool that I can't talk about here. The other auction is for the really cool uniform badges from Ukraine, the real thing. As I said, Vlad even got in trouble. Vlad even got in trouble for sending me, though. He was fine, but it was a very long, a 45-minute conversation on the phone with somebody who was not pleased from the Ukrainian government because they're so real, the stuff Vlad sent. But he told it was for good cause. We were selling him to raise money, and they finally said, okay, which was also nice of them. But yeah, that's how legit the things are. So I'm going to call it a night and go over to discord.aravosis.com. Join us there. Thank you guys for the gifts on TikTok. Thank you for the super chat questions, all of you. I appreciate that so much. And all the other support you guys give, as always, you are fabulous. And let's go to Discord, guys. Okay. Discord.aravosis.com. Be there or be square. I will be there in probably 2 minutes. All right. See you guys shortly. Bye. Oh, and I've got to count to 8. Remember, for the TikTok people who are delayed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, there we go. TikTok caught up already. I can tell on the other screen. All right, bye.